So these attacks accomplished nothing in terms of retarding or limiting Iran's nuclear enrichment program. These attacks were purely an act of political theater for a president who's desperate to be seen as being a decisive leader, but all he showed was American impotence.
大家好，欢迎来到正经脉动。2025年6月22日，美国对伊朗发动了一场举世瞩目的突袭。特朗普政府宣称行动取得巨大成功，但真相到底如何？今天我想带大家听一段硬核的军事分析，来自前联合国武器核查官斯科特里特上校。他曾是美国海军陆战队情报官员，还于1991年到1998年担任联合国武器检察官，负责检查大规模杀伤性武器。在这段访谈中，他以专业视角逐一剖析了美军对伊朗三大核心核设施的空袭效果。他说，这场看似气势汹汹的打击，其实战果可能几乎为零。而且他指出，这次打击早在拜登时期就已经规划演练过多次。他痛批美军原本精密的军事执行能力，如今却被用来搞一场非法、毫无军事价值的政治秀。他说这是美国的灾难。最后他还大胆指出，以色列引以为傲的铁穹防御系统，甚至包括美国本土的导弹防御体系，都很可能是一个骗局。那接下来就让我们听听这位前美军高级军官如何用专业的眼光拆解整场行动背后的真相。
This is an act of perfidy, a surprise attack, an undeclared act of aggression that had no foundation in justification. Again, to justify something like this, which is the equivalent of what we would say a preemptive, a preemptive act of self-defense. So there needs to be an imminent threat that can only be dealt with through this act of aggression. Iran was in the process of negotiations that would resolve all of the issues that could be perceived as a threat. So there is no imminent threat. Moreover, we know that the sites that had been targeted, 3 nuclear sites, Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow, were empty, that these strikes would have zero impact on an Iranian nuclear program that had long since been evacuated from these sites and sent to other locations. It's come out that this strike plan, which was done in cooperation with Israel, was something that had been planned more than a year ago and actually been practiced by the United States and Israel. So this was a pre-planned strike against 3 designated sites that had no military value. So this is purely an act of theater, and any military commander that put American lives at risk to carry out an act of political theater should, literally have their commissions revoked and be drummed out of the service. There was no justification for this, but moreover, the attacks didn't even accomplish what they claimed to have accomplished. We had 1 B-2 bomber drop 2 GBU-57s on the Natanz facility.
Right. What is that? What is the GBU-57? Is that one of these 32,000-pound monsters?
Correct. They're the massive ordnance penetrator weapon that only the B-2 can carry, and it's upon the shoulders of this weapon that the United States has based its hopes of interdicting Iran's nuclear program. But Natanz had been struck at least twice and probably 3 times by the Israelis prior to this attack. And whatever was in Natanz, that, centrifuges, etc., of value had long since been evacuated. People should understand that Natanz is the principal home of centrifuge cascades of the oldest type, the IR-1 centrifuge, which is a very inefficient centrifuge that Iran had long since replaced with these more modern centrifuges that are in Fordow. So to strike Natanz doesn't put back the Iranian program at all, and anything of value in that program had been evacuated. So we put a B-2 bomber over a target to drop 2 very large bombs that accomplished nothing. They literally put 2 additional holes in the ground of a piece of terrain that had no military, scientific, or meaningful value. It was purely a political act. The same with Isfahan. We fired 30 cruise missiles into the Isfahan nuclear complex. It appears that even the U.S. government is admitting that these missiles didn't accomplish the level of destruction that they were hoping to, that the Isfahan facility was deeper underground and more protected. So in normal circumstances, and this dates back to my time as a battle damage assessment officer during the first Gulf War, this would be immediate reattack, which means that because we initiated this, if there was legitimate military purpose to this attack, we would have to reattack to achieve those objectives. It appears, though, that Donald Trump says, no, we're done. We're willing to be done with this, which means, again, this wasn't about achieving anything meaningfully, militarily meaningful on the ground. This was an act of pure politics. And then we get to Fordo, the crown jewel of the three targets, a facility that's 90 meters or 90 feet underground, 100 feet underground, but that's street level measuring. What they're not counting are the ridges above the facility that make it even 3 or 4 times deeper than this. We struck with 6 B-2 bombers, each of which carried 2 of these massive ordnance penetrators. And the best that we could accomplish is that we did damage to 1 entrance and 1 exit of a facility that has 5 exits. We didn't do damage to the hall. We didn't penetrate. But even more critical is that we know the facility was evacuated. There is satellite imagery that shows on June 18th and 19th, the Iranians had brought up trucks to remove the high-value centrifuges that were stored at Fordo. And these centrifuges have been moved to other facilities around Iran that we don't know about, together with the totality of Iran's enriched uranium. That 60% uranium that everybody says can be converted into a bomb in 3 to 5 days. Yeah. We didn't destroy that. That's all moved. So these attacks accomplished nothing in terms of retarding or limiting Iran's nuclear enrichment program. These attacks were purely an act of political theater for a president who's desperate to be seen as being a decisive leader, but all he showed was American impotence.
The Secretary of State referred to the planning of the operation as brilliant. Now, the plan must have begun in the Biden administration. Could something like this have been planned since Donald Trump became president and Pete Hegseth became Secretary of Defense?
Well, I mean, in theory, it could, but the fact is this attack has been rehearsed by the United States and Israel during the Biden administration. Indeed, in the summer of 2023, and I believe again in 2024, there were joint exercises carried out where the United States flew B-2 bombers from Whitman Air Force Base into the theater of operations to carry out rehearsals with the Israelis. It should be pointed out that, according to the Iranian timeline, this was an attack that was not just coordinated with the Israelis, but the Israelis participated in this, meaning that the Israelis had resources and assets that were linked to this, drones and fighter aircraft that were operated over parts of Iran as in supporting operations. So this wasn't a purely American attack. This was done in concert with the Israelis, part of a plan that had been conceived during the Biden administration and rehearsed at least twice during the Biden administration.
Was this brilliant, as Hegseth claimed? Was there anything brilliant about this?
Well, I don't want to, I will never denigrate the professionalism of the American personnel involved. I mean, to have a B-2 bomber fly a mission of this length requires tremendous skill. The refueling operations are technically difficult. They accomplish these. The flight parameters to get into Iran without being detected, to drop these bombs, all points to extreme professionalism. But, that doesn't make this attack brilliant. Anytime you use American military power, there has to be a legitimate reason for the application of force. And here there is no legitimate reason. This cannot be called brilliance. This is the exact opposite. This is a disaster. This is a manifestation of all that's wrong with America today, where the United States military allowed it to be used for an act of political violence, political terrorism, a war crime. This is a war crime. There's no doubting this. There's no defending this. This is an act of aggression without any legitimacy, not only in terms of lacking domestic approval from the Congress, but also under international law. And people scoff at international law, but I do want to remind, Judge, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the United Nations Charter an international treaty was ratified by the United States Senate and therefore, under our own Constitution, becomes the law of the land.
Yes.
And
and who wrote the United Nations Charter? We did.
We did.
And we signed it. Israel signed it. Iran signed it. It prohibits this kind of an attack absolutely against a fellow signatory of the charter without going to the UN first. Trump went to no one. Trump sat in a windowless room and listened to a half dozen people tell him what they thought he wanted to hear. And that's how he made the decision.
100%. And this is, again, this is a political act. This has, you asked me to speak about the military aspects of this, right. But other than the application of force, there is no military value to this. In fact, the president has put at risk tens of thousands of Americans for this political act.
Where are the Americans who are at risk, Scott, and who are they?
Well, there's tens of thousands of American service members who are deployed throughout the region in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, in Bahrain. These are Americans who, have taken an oath to serve their country, have been deployed abroad, ostensibly to do that service, and now have their lives put at risk. There's Americans in Iraq, Americans in Syria that also fall under it, Americans in Turkey. Basically, anybody in the region, life is now at risk through a retaliation potential from Iran, a real potential. I mean, this isn't theoretical. The Iranians have already demonstrated when they attacked Al-Assad air base after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani that they have the real potential of hitting bases decisively in a manner that can that can result in casualties, significant casualties. So here the president has put American lives at risk so that he can stand before the American people and speak absurdly, pontificate about things that didn't happen. This was not a decisive action. He did not destroy Fordo. This wasn't a brilliant strike. This was a national embarrassment.
What do you expect the international reaction would be? I'll give you a menu and you can go wherever you want. Russia, China, India, Pakistan.
Well, first of all, we have to realize that the United States is a rogue nation right now, that we are operating outside the framework of international law. I want to remind people that back in February 4th of 2022, Vladimir Putin flew to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping on the eve of the Beijing Winter Olympics. And the two of them published a 5,000-word joint document in which they said that the rules-based international order that serves as the foundation of how America interacts with the world is a problem, and that Russia and China reject this, and they are going to counter with the law-based international order that's premised on the Charter of the United Nations. And this is a major commitment by them, and much of the rest of the world seeks to adhere to the United Nations Charter, this framework of international law. So all of the nations that you mentioned, I believe, will be working to ensure that America's gross act of irresponsibility and illegality doesn't destroy this framework of international law. And I think you'll be seeing the Russians and the Chinese moving to isolate the United States at the Security Council, at the United Nations, Pakistan doing the same thing. This doesn't mean that they can't provide assistance to Iran, and they are going to provide assistance to Iran. But I believe that all of these nations will be working to prevent an escalation, a dangerous escalation of this conflict. I think the goal right now is to isolate the United States and keep the United States from re-engaging militarily while allowing Iran to continue its lawful retaliation against Israel. Remember, Israel initiated this by carrying out an unlawful, illegal surprise attack with no justification. Israel hasn't even tried to, make cognizable an argument under Article 51, preeminent self-defense. They haven't done that because they can't do that.
Right.
Because any imminent threat is nullified by the fact that the Iranians were actively in negotiations dealing with the very issue at hand. Iran, however, has gone to the United Nations, has said that they will defend themselves, and Iran's legitimacy of carrying out these strikes against Israel continue until which time Israel stops striking Iran. It is literally the more Israel bombs Iran, the more legitimate Iran's retaliation becomes. So I think what we're going to see is the international community working to contain this problem. Already, you see the United States reaching out to China, asking for Chinese intervention to keep the Iranians from shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. Whether or not China acts on that, I don't know. But the point is, you see the Iranian foreign minister flying to Russia, to Moscow, to meet with Vladimir Putin. I think the Iranians will hold off on any precipitous act until they have touched base with all of their supporters. And I do believe that Iran will remain consistent to international law and not seek to act in a manner which, while maybe justifiable from an emotional standpoint, would not be allowed under international. For instance, for Iran to strike Saudi Arabia today is not something that would be permitted, because the American forces deployed in Saudi Arabia did not participate in this attack, and
Right.
Saudi Arabia has condemned this. So I don't, for the people that think that Iran's going to come out and lash out irresponsibly, I don't see that happening. What I believe Iran will do is continue to operate within the framework of international law, working to isolate the United States and keep the focus on where it belongs, which is the criminal actions of Israel.
What is the extent of damage that Iran has caused in Israel, which the Netanyahu regime is keeping from the West and from all media?
The fact is, we don't know exactly because of
because they're keeping it from us. What do you think, though, just from the nature of your understanding of the destructive power of the projectiles that have been launched and of the weakening power of their so-called Iron Dome?
Well, we also have to emphasize the accuracy of these missiles, meaning that when you launch a missile with destructive power, there's a difference between landing in a civilian population area and hitting a target of military or economic value. And the Iranians are using weapons that have a high degree of accuracy. They're targeting military targets. This isn't me speaking. I mean, I know people are out there going, well, Scott, you're just a tool of this, that, and the other thing. This statement actually comes from the former head of an Israeli intelligence unit, Unit 8200, who has said that, we, the Israelis, are trying to, paint the Iranians as animals, as beasts. But he said the fact is they're a very capable modern state who's behaving properly in the targeting of Israel, that their targets are exclusively military in nature or related to, legitimate national security, targetable sites. This is a senior Israeli official saying this, and that's the reality. Iran is doing horrific damage to the Israelis. These strikes are very accurate. They're inflicting a tremendous amount of damage on Israel. And Israel is a small nation unable to absorb this damage. And so if this conflict continues, you're going to see Israel face the reality that its ability to sustain functionality as a viable nation state is being eroded by an Iranian retaliatory capacity that doesn't seem to have a bottom. Moreover, you speak of the Iron Dome. I hear people say, well, Israel will become defenseless in several days when they run out of interceptor missiles. Judge, Israel's defenseless now. They have all the interceptor missiles they need right now on a daily basis, and they're backed up by the United States. They haven't run out of missiles yet. They're firing.
Well, why are they defenseless if they have not run out of missiles? Explain, please.
Because the Iron Dome doesn't work. It can't defend against a modern missile threat. I mean, and I say this not only to point out the fact that Iron Dome isn't working, but, those Americans who listen to the president when he briefs on the Golden Dome, an American ballistic missile defense shield, I'm here to tell you right now, many of the technologies that would be incorporated in that are incorporated by the United States into Israel's ballistic missile defense shield, and they aren't stopping this. And the Iranian missiles, while they're very good, don't compete with Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles in terms of technology lethality. This missile defense is a sham. It's a joke. It's a scam, and it's played out daily by the Iranians firing missiles specifically designed to defeat the missile shield that Israel and the United States have erected.
好了，斯科特里特上校这段分析我们就听到这里。他用一个专业人士的视角，给出了完全不同于特朗普政府的战局解读。首先，他详细分析了美军对伊朗3大核设施的空袭行动。他的结论是，伊朗早已将关键设备和材料转移，这场浩大的空袭几乎毫无收获。简单说，这是一场服务于特朗普个人政治的表演秀。 接着他指出，这次行动不仅战略无效，从法律上讲也是非法的。特朗普政府公然违反了美国主导制定的联合国宪章，把美国置于流氓国家的地位。更严重的是，他还把中东数万名美军士兵的生命当成了政治赌博的筹码。最后，里特上校直言，以色列的铁穹神话已经破产，面对现代导弹攻击时，他根本挡不住。连美国本土的防御系统也存在严重问题。好了，今天的分享就到这里，欢迎订阅我们的频道，我们下次再见。